Grayson McCall back to Coastal Carolina and more Sunbelt hoop surprises. It's Locked On Sunbelt.
You are Locked On Sunbelt, your daily podcast on the Sunbelt Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy New Year, everyone. I'm Dave Schultz, your host for Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day, hosting afternoons on Sports Radio 105.5 WNSP in Mobile, covering the South Alabama Jaguars, and prior to that, covering the Louisiana Ragin Cajuns, hosting mornings on 103.7 The Game. Today's episode, the first of 2023, is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, big news in, we'll get to the college basketball a little bit later. But the big news that came out today, sources are reporting that Coastal Carolina's Grayson McCall is heading back to Coastal Carolina. That is huge news for the Chanticleers, not being with Jamie Chadwell has moved on to Liberty to replace Hugh Freeze, and now they get their quarterback back, who was in the portal and is now reportedly out of the portal, heading back to Coastal Carolina. That's huge news because kind of up for grabs in the Sun Belt East. As most teams will be looking for quarterbacks. Not everybody, but many of them. And with Grayson McCall, not one, not two, but three-time Sun Belt Player of the Year coming back, that certainly solidifies what Coastal Carolina is going to do under new head coach Tim Beck. James Madison's going to need a new quarterback. Marshall has their quarterback, but App State's going to need a new quarterback. Georgia Southern's going to need a new quarterback. And I got to think about Georgia State and Old Dominion, but those were two on the bottom of the conference. But for Coastal to come back, because basically the way they played at the end of the season would tell you that they have a lot more problems than just Grayson McCall. And Grayson McCall went to the portal. It would look like he was going to Auburn as soon as Hugh Freeze was named head coach. Apparently, Grayson McCall reportedly Grayson McCall reached out to Hugh Freeze. They had issues getting his credits to transfer from Coastal Carolina to Auburn. Then he was headed to Florida. That didn't work out. And kind of the music started to stop, right? We're playing musical chairs. It's not only the coaching carousel going on these days, it is the player carousel going around these days. And the music was starting to stop. And Grayson McCall was like, I better go back to Coastal Carolina. So good for him. And that is a big deal, again, in the East. The West, I think, is going to be much more competitive, or tougher, I think is the word that I'd be looking for, because I think the East is wide open, whereas Troy, South Alabama, Southern Miss, and maybe the Cajuns are going to compete for the West. When you have Monroe, we'll see what G.J. Kinney has, and we're hoping to get him on the show here this week. And Butch Jones is going to have a couple of really good recruiting classes at Arkansas State. Somewhere along the way, that's going to have to start to shine through because they just have not shined the last couple of years. But again, James Madison won the East. They beat Coastal Carolina. Remember, Coastal, didn't they lose their last 3 ball games? They lost to James Madison, got hammered. They lost to Troy in the Sun Belt Championship game. And then they lost to East Carolina. Now, Grayson McCall was banged up in those ball games, right? He was coming off injury. They did beat Southern Miss in the first ball game that McCall missed, but they kind of eked out that victory, kind of a come from ahead ball game where they were up 17-0 and then down 20-17, and then they came away with a 26-23 victory over Southern Miss. But then, they could not handle James Madison. They could not handle Troy. And they had all kinds of issues with East Carolina as well. So big news for Coastal Carolina to get their quarterback back. Marshall's quarterback should be back. Also, Rasheen Ali should be back as well. Marshall was breaking in Cam Fancher, and he's just a freshman. Let's see if he's a redshirt freshman. Probably a redshirt freshman. So he will be heading into his redshirt sophomore season. So he's got a few more seasons to go there. Kalen Laybourne moved on. He led the team in rushing, over 1,500 yards. But he's going on. He's going to try to go to the NFL. And Rasheen Ali, who stepped away from the team for most of the season, came back for the last few games. He's expected back. And so that's the one team at the top of the standings in the Sun Belt, in the East anyways, that is settled in the quarterback, along now with Coastal Carolina, because before James Madison has to replace Todd Centeio, it was going to be Coastal replacing Grayson McCall, and App State replacing Chase Bryce, and Georgia Southern replacing Kyle Van Treese. Now you got Marshall having Cam Fancher, and you got Coastal Carolina welcoming back Grayson McCall. That may or may not help recruiting with the quote national signing day coming up in February to play with Grayson McCall. He still has 2 years left. How many years he's going to play, who knows? But right now, Coastal only has 6 commits. That's probably because of the head coaching change, but they only have 6 commits right now. They are 11th in the Sun Belt. Let me see if those are, let's see what's listed as 6 commits. Yeah, they only have 6 commits. They're not even listed of anybody in the transfer portal. They rank 124th out of like 130 teams. So, not great there. And so we'll see if that has any effect on playing with Grayson McCall, at least for one season, if not 2. But that is the big news on Sunbelt news anyways, is that Coastal Carolina's Grayson McCall, there we go. Coastal Carolina's Grayson McCall is coming back and is reportedly out of the transfer portal. So that is absolutely huge news. All right, after this, we will talk college basketball and some interesting home losses, road wins, road losses. Some really good teams that started out really poorly, and maybe some surprises as well. And we will do that right after I tell you about, as I mentioned, this episode of Locked On Sunbelt is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. As a small business owner or hiring manager, you know that success in 2023 all depends on the team members you surround yourself with. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. With LinkedIn Jobs, you can hire qualified candidates more efficiently by matching open roles with people who have the skills, values, and experiences to help you achieve your goals. LinkedIn Jobs helps you quickly attract qualified candidates to your open jobs with targeting tools. They identify the most qualified candidates on LinkedIn Jobs and connect with them fast and for free. LinkedIn Jobs makes it easy to screen and rate applicants based on your job qualifications, all on one platform. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, back with more on Locked On Sunbelt. We told you about Grayson McCall heading back to Coastal Carolina. That is huge for the Chanticleers. Meanwhile, a full slate of games on Saturday, basically finishing up the weekend in Sunbelt play. We had some upsets on Thursday. We have more on Saturday. And how about Old Dominion getting the win over the Ragin Cajuns? The Cajuns were 10-2 heading into Sunbelt play. They are now 0-2. So when I repeat this on a regular basis, winning on the road in college basketball, or any level for that fact of the matter, but especially college sports, is hard. Believe me, because the Cajuns are good and they are starting out 0-2. That is not what they expected to do by any stretch of the imagination. Old Dominion over the Cajuns, 70-66. Great job by ODU to hang on as Old Dominion was blowing them out at halftime, 38-24. Cajuns outscore them by 10 in the second half, but they do hold on. Greg Williams for the Cajuns had 16 points. You had 3 players off the bench for Old Dominion with scoring in double figures. Faison Fields had 11 points. D'Angelo Steins had 11 points. And Chauncey Jenkins had 12 points. So they did a really good job off the bench. And the Cajuns have struggled. Kobe Julian coming off the bench, 16 minutes, just 2 for 10 overall, 1 for 6 from three-point land. Cajuns again going with the three-pointers. They only shooting 10 free throws in the ball game. I guess technically that was the difference of the game. Old Dominion was 14 of 22, didn't shoot particularly well, but they shot 22 free throws to the Cajuns just 10, and they made 14 of them to the Cajuns just 7. So big upset there as the Cajuns dropped to 0-2 in the conference. Old Dominion improves to 1-1. Elsewhere, South Alabama, without Isaiah Moore, drops a ball game to Georgia State, 68-58. South Alabama actually got off to a good start, but Georgia State finished up the first half on a 12-0 run, and then I think they started the second half with a 6-0 run, so that was an 18-0 run to end the first half and begin the second half, and it could be a long season for South Alabama. We'll see how long Isaiah Brown is out. Craig Stevenson reporting at AL.com. It's not expected to be a long-term injury, but we did see it in the ball game against Georgia Southern, where we sort of said they may have dodged a bullet because it didn't seem to be that serious. Because after getting up and going to the bench, although he didn't return from the game, he was not being tended to. He was sitting on the bench in the chair, so it couldn't have been that serious. But it did seem like he was in a little bit of pain. He tried to make a pass and slipped in the lane and then was on the ground in a little bit of pain. So hopefully he comes back as soon as possible, maybe as soon as this Thursday when they do open up Sunbelt play at home. But it's going to be a tough sledding for South Alabama. Kevin Samuel, he's got to score more points. And, it's 4-9, and all those shots are around the rim. He's 0 for 4 from the free throw line, and I presume that's what the opposing teams are going to do. You just foul him, especially if it gets to be late in the ball game. He did have 8 points and 11 rebounds, but he's got to be more. He's got to get more offensive production from Kevin Samuel. Should be noted, Owen White is starting to snap out of it. He's had a couple of good ball games. He played well against Georgia Southern, and Georgia State shot it well. Made 4 3-pointers. He had 14 points. Turbo Jones struggled, and Greg Parham, they combined for 10 for 30. Greg Parham had 15 points. Turbo had 8, and they only got 5 points from Ormiston off of the bench, who's starting to play more as well. But they are going to need some help from Javon Franklin. He is all of a sudden in a little bit of a shooting slump for the Jaguars. But Georgia State, under Jonas Hayes, 1-1 in the conference, and South Alabama drops to 0-2. They do get a couple weeks at home, which they really have not had at all this year. They get Arkansas State, Texas State, James Madison, and then the Cajuns will be in town in a couple of weeks. Okay, elsewhere in the conference, we'll go over these a little quicker. James Madison improves to 2-0. They beat Marshall 72-66. Marshall 1-1 in the Sun Belt. Let me see if James Madison, did they get those 2 wins? They got 2 wins on the road, so that is big. They beat Georgia State in the first game of conference play, and now they beat Marshall, who is one of those other teams. It's kind of Marshall, Southern Miss, and the Cajuns. Now maybe James Madison, with their 11th win of the season, is on the upper echelon of Sunbelt basketball teams as well. Georgia Southern goes to 2-0. They go on the road to beat Cliff Ellis and Coastal Carolina, 73-64. Good job by Georgia Southern to start out 2-0 again. And any win on the road is huge. And this is almost shocking. UM Monroe had won 4 ball games so far this season. They've increased that by 50%. They're now up to 6. They are 2-0 in the Sun Belt and 2 wins on the road. They went into San Marcos and beat the defending regular season champs, Texas State. And now they go on the road and beat Arkansas State, 84-62. Great job by Keith Richard and the Warhawks to try and salvage the season, because this could have gotten out of hand fast. And all of a sudden, they won a couple of ball games in a row. They'd only won 4 out of their first 13, and now they've won 2 in a row. So UL Monroe off to a good start, at least in conference play, as is Southern Miss. Now, they've had both games at home, and they have the most wins in the conference, which is 13. They're 13-2, 2-0 in the Sun Belt. They take down App State 76-70, and it'll be interesting to see on if Southern Miss is the best team. So far, you got Southern Miss, Monroe, Georgia Southern, James Madison are all 2-0. Texas State off to a tough start. They're 0-2. They dropped to Troy 55-52. Troy goes on the road and gets the win for the Trojans. And so you do have, a few teams that are undefeated, and kind of surprisingly, I know it's early, I know it's only 2 ball games, and I know it's only 2 games on the road, but I'm shocked that the Cajuns are 0-2. I'm shocked. That I might be more shocked the Cajuns are 0-2 than the Warhawks are 2-0. Georgia Southern being 2-0 is nice. James Madison, not surprisingly 2-0, actually. Although going into Marshall is a nice job by them. Marshall was 12-2 before the loss, and Southern Miss continues to play well. So you got 4 teams that are 2-0. Got a half a dozen teams or so that are 1-1. Cajuns, Mountaineers, Texas State, and South Alabama, who, again, it's looking like a little bit of a long season for South Alabama unless they can find some scoring or decide to play a different style of basketball. They need to slow things down to try and have a chance, because right now, it just doesn't look like South Alabama has any kind of offensive punch is what I'm looking at. So that's kind of the deal with that. All right, let's take a timeout. We'll preview the rest of the week, hoping, we could talk some Senior Bowl and start looking at the recruiting classes for the Sun Belt. I think that'll be good as well. But first, as we are getting towards, we still got a huge bowl day today with the New Year's Day Bowls the day after New Year's. And, of course, those NFL playoffs are coming up. So let me tell you about BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From pro football to college bowl season to basketball and soccer, we've got it all at BetOnline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you can even find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, so we're also going to try and get some coaches, football coaches, to come on. We had John Summerall on. We've had Charles Huff on, Kurt Segnetti on. It would be nice to get, Kane Womack on right here in Mobile. So we've had Will Hall on. And so maybe they got a little bit more, I don't like saying it, but dead time, a little bit more quiet time. They may be on vacation until the dead time is over before or right after the national championship game between Georgia and TCU. And so we're going to try and get them. And then, we got some more Senior Bowlers that are, all of a sudden have been announced to come to the Senior Bowl. We've had some guys on already, but you got, Nick Hampton and Cameron Peoples from App State. And we've gone over a lot of these guys. Jared Clark, defensive lineman, he just decided to go pro. And so now he's going to be invited to the Senior Bowl. So maybe we can get him on. It's a good opportunity to talk to these guys. Here is the little inside baseball issue. See, we had Nick Salvadarian. And so the inside baseball thing with this now is once the bowl games are over, these guys scatter. All right. They're done with school. And they've moved out. Now, they could be working out. For all I know, they could be working out in Mobile. A lot of quarterbacks come down to Mobile to work out. They could be working out in Pensacola, could be working out in Dallas. It's just a matter of tracking them down. The people who we use to track them down, though, the SIDs, don't necessarily have any contact with them. So we will see if we can contact them. You can always go through social media and other different ways that we can get a hold of them. But we will we'll attempt to get them on. So we're looking at coaches to, kind of put a bow on the season and look ahead and see how those recruiting classes are going. Again, what about another 5 weeks or so? Let me see. When is usually signing day? It used to be right after the Super Bowl, but I think it's February 8th is signing day. So 31-8, 39. So you have 6.5 weeks or so before that. So we'll see who can make up ground. Obviously, Coastal Carolina, they got the best news at all. They found their quarterback for next year, but they need to do some work in terms of the rest of their class. And some other teams are doing well already. So we will get into that as well. So we want to get some coaches on. We want to get some senior bowlers on. And we'll see if we get some other players on to talk Locked On Sunbelt. All right. Want to wish you and yours a happy new year. Thanks very much for tuning in. I am your host, Dave Schultz, and you've been watching and listening to Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day.